Welcome to our shir, Parshas Lecha, Tafshin Pei Aleph. And I'd like to make today's shir dedicated Lech Nishmas, my mother, Alea Shalom, Miri Bas Marina Rabbi Shechiel, whose 29th yahrzeit is Motzai Shabbos, and she should have Lichtig Gan Eden. I learned so much from her, and it's 29 years later, it's as fresh as yesterday, and I hope that the Torah that we say today will be a schus for her neshama, and so much we can learn from her. It says, "Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech lecha mi'atzim ladach beis avicha l'eretz asher eka." Famous pasuk, like all first pasukim. Hashem tells Avram, Lech lecha, go. The beginning. Klal Yisrael is now starting. We moved out of the Tekuf of Adam, Tekuf of Lech, and now Klal Yisrael, the journey of Klal Yisrael is about to begin. And it begins in a very interesting way. It begins with HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling Avram, go, but I'm not going to tell you where you're going. Just go. El Oretz Asher Eka. I'll let you know where you're going to go. And one would think that not knowing where you're going is a very stressful thing. I know traveling is always stressful. I know when you go to Eretz Yisrael, you're a total wreck till you get on that plane. You have to go to the airport. Maybe they'll stop you here, they'll stop you there. It's a very frightening type of a thing. Even on you're in the plane, will you get there on time? Will the plane be delayed? Are you going to end up with a nightmare? Everybody's, and then you know where you're going, and to know where you're not going, to not know where you're going, rather, that's something that's a little bit scary. And nevertheless, that's how the journey of Klal Yisrael begins, and maybe it's a samal of what is coming. But Rashi says something perplexing in his first words: "La nos l'toivascha," for your hana, for your toiva, and we say, "Hana toiva." What's the hana of going where you don't know where you're going? What's the toiva? What are you getting from? What's the good of going where you don't know where you're going? So there's a famous story, we'd like to say this often in the shir over the years, about Rabbi Premishlan. Rabbi Premishlan was a big tzaddik, and he was known especially for his mitzvah pidyon shvuyim, for redeeming captives, which was very common in those days. And very often, people were captured, Barbary pirates, whoever they were, and they captured them, and he would redeem them, and he'd raise tons of money and work overtime day and night to raise the money. One time there was a bilbil against him, and he was thrown into jail on trumped up charges of redeeming captives. And he was very upset about it. He said, Hashem, I understand that I'm in trouble. I'm not such a tzaddik. I do all sorts of errors. I deserve to be in this pit. I deserve to be in jail. No problem. But of all things, I should be thrown into jail for pidyon shvuyim, for a trumped-up charge in the very thing that I'm so good at. Help me understand that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So one day he's sitting in jail, and a woman comes to him, and she says to him, "Can I tell you Dvar Torah, Meir?" And he says, "Of course, tell me Dvar Torah." And she asks our question. She says, "What's the anas l'toivas of going where you don't know where you're going?" And she said the answer is that Avram Avinu was the Baal Chesed par excellence. He wanted to do everything that he could to help other people. And he davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, please help me do what I'm doing 80%. I want to go to 100%. I want to do it perfectly. Help me do it even better. Give me some tips. The Baal Chesed handbook, I want tips. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm going to do you a favor. He says, when you go traveling, you're sitting in your house, you have a nice tent over there, Avram was a gvir, you have food, you have drinks, you have water, you got whatever you need. You've never really gone out and traveled. You know what it's like to be a traveler in the desert? You're in a caravan, any minute bandits could come and attack you. You have no water, you don't know if you're going to get water. Your food's running out. It's a schreckliche Zach. You're dirty. You haven't been able to bathe in weeks, maybe months while you're traveling. You're in such desperate need, and you don't have it. Avram, you've never been there. In order to do chesed for another person, you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes. And not just put yourself in their shoes, but literally put yourself in their shoes. And that's what I'm going to help you do. I'm going to help you put yourself in their shoes, literally, not just figuratively in your head. You'll say, oh, yeah, I got to put myself in their shoes. I have to think. No, I'm going to put you in their shoes. I'm going to send you where you don't know where you're going. And you're going to have the same nervousness, and you're not going to have the right supplies. You're going to run out of food. Everything's going to happen to you. And in that, you will understand so much better what these people are going through. So she said to him, Remeir, you help shvuyim, you help captives, you help them, and you raise money, and you stay up all night, and you gewaltig. But have you ever been a captive yourself? Have you ever known what it's like to sit in a pit? In those, they didn't have jails like we have today. There was nothing. They didn't have a bed. They were literally, it's called the pit, the bore, because they stuck them in a pit. Did you ever have that? I'm going to do you a big favor, Mayor. I'm going to help you do your pidyon shvi even better, because you know what it feels like. Just like Avraham Avinu. And you know who that lady was? That was Sari Menu, that came to Remeir to teach him this Gevaltic lesson. So the Torah tells us, Lech Lecha, Lahanascha, L'Toivascha, for your good, because that's what Avraham wanted, to do chesed better. And now being sensitized in such a powerful way, he will be able to do that chesed so much better. You know, the last 2 weeks we spoke about going into Golus, how Cain went into Golus, how the Dor Mabel, the Dor Aflaga went into Golus rather. They all went into Golus, and we said there's lessons to be learned from Golus, to teach us from going into Golus. Now Avraham Avinu is also 3 weeks in a row we have Golus, to go into Golus, because so much can be learned from going into Golus. So much sensitivity can be learned from going into Golus. Now you understand what other people are going through. So many of us, we all try and be Balei Chesed, we all try and do good things. But how many organizations were started? Almost every organization, Chesed organization, and Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael, there are hundreds, thousands. But almost everyone, if we look back in the history, was started by somebody who went through that problem, or a family member went through that problem, or a friend went through the problem. So if you have, for a special type of disease that only a few people have, and how we can help people with that, Rahman al-Itzlan, and make them better, and serve them, it's usually somebody who had some shaykhs because they got sensitized. So we have learned a powerful, powerful lesson. We think that when bad things happen to good people, it's an einish from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not necessarily. It could be an opportunity from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to sensitize us to a different problem. So if a person has a certain issue, whatever the issue may be, a medical issue, a financial issue, was will nicht sein, a problem with children, with parents, with cousins, with brothers, everybody's got a problem. Don't just sit and kvetch. Say, okay, Hashem gave me this problem. Why? Let me think about it. Maybe it's Hashem sensitizing me so I can help other people. And that'll make all the difference. So let us take the Yisurim that come to a person. It says somebody has Yisurim, Yifashfesh b'maisav. Misha Yisurim Bonalav Yifash b'maisav. He says, think about, what did I do wrong? Let's think about this. But then he should use it to sensitize himself and say, maybe I did an Aveira, or maybe I just wasn't sensitive enough. Maybe now I have to be more sensitive to the issue, and that'll make the difference. So we learn a very powerful lesson from Lahanascha L'Toivascha. So we said that Avraham Avinu was going, and he didn't know where he literally didn't know where he was going. So I'd like to say another pshat in why at Kadosh Baruch Hu, perhaps we can get a little. And I saw Maisa from Reb Zilberstein. Reb Zilberstein told a story, a beautiful story. Says he said there was somebody who's walking past the house of the Jabina Rav. This must have been 70, 80 years ago, this story. And he sees Rabbi Levin, the tzaddik of Yerushalayim, the great Rabbi Levin, is standing in front of the Jabina Rav's house, and he's crying. He's treren. He's crying and crying and crying. And he runs over to him. The person's name was Rabbi Yosef Buxman, was Manal of the Beis Yaakov. He runs over, he says, Rabbi, what's doing? Why are you crying? So he says, I know somebody's very sick, and I want to be mispal. But this is before way before 67. The Jordanians didn't let the Yidden go to the Kaisel. I can't go to the Kaisel. So what should I do? So I came to the house of the Jabina Rav, a tzaddik who all of Klal Yisrael comes to his doorstep. And they go to him for Esav Sosia, for comfort. And I said, this is the place. If I don't have the kaisel, I have the house of Shabina Rov, where so many people come for comfort, so many people come for brachas, so much Torah comes from here. This is like going to the kaisel. Going to the house of the tzaddik, said Rabbi Levin, is like going to the kaisel. And he says, Taka is Yerushalmi that says like this. The Yerushalmi tells us that it says, Dirsha Hashem b'matzai, karo b'yosef karav. Famous thing we said on our laning on the day of the of Atinus. Dirsha Hashem b'matzai, seek Hashem where he is found. That's the Bati Midrashim, Bati Gnesius. Karo b'yosef karav, call him where he is close. Says the Yerushalmi, Zeh Beisa Shel Rebbe Eliezer. That's the house of Rebbe Eliezer. That where Rebbe Eliezer is, that's where the Beis HaMikdash is. You don't have a Beis HaMikdash, says the Gemara, the Yerushalmi, you have the house of the Tzaddik. And they bring another Gemara, a Medrash, Medrash Shir Shirim Aleph. It says, Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Yeshua were Bali Plukta. They had the Gemara talks major machlokes in between them. But nevertheless, it says that Rabbi Yeshua, there was outside of the base Medrash, Rabbi Eliezer, there was a certain stone, a big boulder. And on that boulder, Rabbi Eliezer used to sit. So Rabbi Yeshua saw that boulder, and he went over and he kissed it. And he said, this is like the Aron HaKodesh. This boulder has Kedusha, because this Rabbi Eliezer sat, it's kind of Kedusha, that I can kiss it like the Beis HaMikdash. Where a Talmid Chacham is, where the Shechin is. Where a Talmid Chacham is, where the Beis HaMikdash is. I remember of Belsky, Satzal, he used to talk about Camp Aguda in the old days. And there was once a certain Chavrusashaft by two Chashuva people, and they used to sit under a certain tree at Camp Aguda. And every day they learned with a Seder. And this was a long time before Masmidi programs, before learning programs. It was unusual. And they used to sit there. And the campers were in such awe, they used to call that place Admas Kodesh, Holy Land. Because it was Kedusha, because that's where Torah was being learned. So we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, but we have Talmidei Chachamim. And those Talmidei Chachamim is where we can go and we can have our Beis HaMikdash. And that's why we go to the Talmid Chacham to daven. We go to Tzaddikim. Everybody goes to Tzaddikim to daven for us. Why? Everybody knows your tefillah can also. You also can daven. The answer is that the Talmid Chacham, it's like going to the Kaisel. We're here in America, can't go to the Kaisel. Go to the Talmid Chacham. Stand outside his house and daven. You don't even have to know you're there. You'll stand outside his house and you'll daven. And in that way, you'll have the Kedusha of the Beis Mikdash, a Gemara. Rabbi Levin had a Gemara. Way back. So Reb Zilberstein, of course, brings it to halacha. He says there was a bacher in the mirror that had to buy a dira. Right? We know that the bachrim they live in a dira. It's not enough for I was like when I was in the mirror, there was still room in the dormitory. There's no more room in the dormitory. It's a very little room. So he used to stay in an apartment. So in the apartment, he had a shaila. He had two apartments that he could take. One was 2 minutes away from the yeshiva, and one was 7. But the one that was 7 was an apartment that the Kaf HaChaim, the great tzaddik, the Kaf HaChaim, the great Talmid Chacham, the Kaf HaChaim, lived in that apartment. So he said, it's zapt mit Kedusha. Where should I go? So he asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Shlita, and Reb Chaim said, really you should go to the apartment of the Kaf HaChaim, because there's such Kedusha there. But obviously 2 minutes away, you'll be able to learn that much more every day because you'll have less time to walk. So he says that's Minat Seyach, that you should go in the closer apartment. But really, you should go, if it wouldn't be such a shaila, there is a difference. That where there's Kedusha, it makes all of the difference. So we learn such a tremendous thing. Where the Talmid Chacham is, where the Talmid Chacham goes, that's where we want to be. That's where we want to go. And that's where there's Kedusha. So if a person has an Eisar, a person has a problem, he needs to go something. Even if he can't get to the Talmid Chacham himself, stand outside his house. There's a Kedusha, there used to be a minig in Europe. I don't know, people, maybe they still do it today. But if the Bachram would be sitting learning the base medrash, and a woman would come in, and she'd go running over to the Aron Kodesh and put her head in, open the Aron Kodesh, put her head in, and start crying and wailing to the Rebbeinu Shalom, because that's where the Kedusha is. To be close to the Kedusha, that means everything. So Avram Avinu, I'm thinking, when you know where you're going, right? In the old days, Marshall, before Waze, before GPS and all these things, some of going that we used to go around. I remember to get to some place which is around the block, you had no idea where it was. You make a wrong turn and you were in trouble. You spent 10, 15 minutes driving around until you got to the place. Now you go straight to the place. If Avram Avinu had been told where he's going, he would go straight to the place. But Avram Avinu was told, I'll let you know where you're going. That means Avram will go here, he'll go there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that Avram Avinu should be all over Eretz Yisrael. And therefore the Kedusha of Avram should be everywhere. Just like later on, when Avram Avinu went into Eretz Yisrael, right? When Avram Avinu was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, walk the length and the breadth of the land, right? So you should be kainit, but also you should bring Kedusha everywhere. By the way, that's one of the pshatim why the Meraglim were sent. Because everywhere the Meraglim would go, would bring Kedusha. And that Kedusha would destroy and defeat the tumah of the Amim that were there before. And that would make it easier to conquer, because the tzaddikim were there. So our advanced guard is the tzaddikim. Those are the people that we send in front of the army. Those are the advanced guard, because they're the ones who bring the Kedusha there. So we see this important point, that wherever there's a person, a tzaddik, that's where there's Kedusha. Whenever Avram went, it would bring Kedusha to that spot. And Yidden years later would see that as well. And that's why they say, why the Yidden were in Eretz Goshen, because that's where Sarah Yemena was, way back before. And she brought Kedusha to that Malkum, and that became where they wanted to go later. And that's why Yaakov sent Yehuda to Gaishna, because Yehuda is going to put down roots of Kedusha. And once there's Kedusha later on, the Yidden will come, will be so much easier for them. So we look to the tzaddik, we turn to the tzaddik, and everywhere the tzaddik goes brings a Kedusha. Nowadays, tzaddik travels around the country. Shmuel Kamenetsky goes here, he goes there. Every place he goes, there's a Kedusha that he brings. Not only that people remember it for the rest of their lives, wherever the tzaddik goes, but there's a Kedusha that's brought, the intrinsic Kedusha. And that's what Avram Avinu brought. So, Lech Lecha mi'aretz l'ad beis avicha el haaretz asher eka. Two reasons. The first reason is Avram Avinu not knowing where you're going will sensitize you, and you'll be able to do chesed better. And the second reason is, wherever you go, there will be Kedusha. Have a good Shabbos, a lichtige Shabbos, and Yitzhak Hashem, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should lessen all the tzaras that Klal Yisrael is going through, and bring us the Gula Shlema B'Meher Yameinu.